Hi guys, it's me, Shazza HD, and welcome to the 9th Grand Prix of 2025 and the final part of the second triple header of this season, the Spanish Grand Prix at the Circuit De Catalunya near Barcelona. And thankfully, we're in for overall a more interesting weekend than what we got in Monaco. Don't get me wrong, qualifying was exciting a week ago, but the race really was, as I said last week, a farce. Yeah, very much looking forward to this weekend. And if you don't know, I will be doing a full amount of coverage for this Grand Prix. Previously, I was only going to do a qualifying watch along for this Spanish Grand Prix, but I will be doing both a qualifying stream, obviously, today, and then a race watch along tomorrow. And with how close the field is looking in certain areas, I think that is going to be a good decision because I think we're in for a very competitive Grand Prix. Now, if you did watch practice 3, which finished about an hour ago, you'd think, no, we're not going to have a competitive weekend because McLaren were miles quicker than everybody else. But there was a lot of teams in that session that didn't really do that great lap times and were not even really going as quick as they've gone in other parts of the weekend. So, yeah, I think practice 3, not that representative of what we're actually going to get in qualifying, plus the temperatures will be a bit different as well. But, yeah, I think the fight for pole, the midfield, is going to be really close today. And I cannot wait to get into it. And of course, we've got just under an hour and a half to go until qualifying is underway in Spain. And as usual, we're going to go through the typical build-up, looking at the results of practice 2 yesterday, the most representative session we've had so far this weekend. And then we'll get into also the sector time data, just to see why certain teams are quick and why certain teams are not. And then, based off of that data, pretty much, I will give my predictions as to what I think will happen in qualifying today. And of course, I want to hear from you guys. What do you think is going to happen today? There is a poll running at the top of the live chat. Let me know. Who do you think, out of the 4 options I put in that poll, takes pole position? No pun intended. Max Verstappen, Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, and George Russell are your options. And you have the next, 2 hours and 15 minutes, let's say, to decide who will get pole position. And we'll see who you guys end up voting for. In general, hope you guys are well. Hope you're all doing well no matter what's going on in your part of the world. And again, no matter whatever the circumstances of what's going on in your part of the world. Hope you're all doing well. Hope it's, beautiful weather wherever you are. And I hope you're all doing well. And I hope you're all as excited as I am for qualifying today in Spain, which, like I said, it's going to be a close, exciting session. It's not going to be a dominant session by a single team. I don't believe that for a second. And I'll illustrate why in a few moments' time. Again, quick update. If you didn't know, I will be doing a race watch along also tomorrow. And Niblo, who is usually my co-commentator for the race watch alongs, he should be on tomorrow as well. I know you guys enjoy us on commentary. So, he should be around for the race tomorrow. Anyway, let's get into this build-up to the session, and of course start by looking at the data from yesterday, practice 2, the most representative session we've had so far. And McLaren, no surprise, the quickest team over the rest of the field in practice. I could have told you that was going to be the case, and no surprise, technical directive has done absolutely nothing really to affect the field, which I knew was going to happen. This technical directive has been hyped up so much by really people desperately hoping for McLaren's dominance this season to end. Ferrari fans, basically. Yeah, it was pure, and I thought it was at the time pure copium, and that's exactly what it's turned out to be. McLaren have the best car, genuinely. It's not, they've not had the best car because it's illegal. They've had the best car because it is the best car. And there are certain fan bases who just can't accept that. But that is reality. That is fact. McLaren do have the best car. And McLaren, yeah, no surprise yesterday, the quickest team. Mercedes looking good. Probably the best Mercedes have looked on a Friday practice day since probably Bahrain, which was, 6 weeks ago. So, yeah, Mercedes definitely looking in good shape for the rest of the weekend, really. Whether they're going to win the race or not, completely different topic. And I would be shocked if they did, because I don't think they're quite, on the pace this weekend to quite do that. But in qualifying, I think definitely they can get in the top 3 on the grid with one of their cars, as long as both drivers nail their laps in qualifying. So watch out for Mercedes. Definitely looking strong here in Barcelona. Max Verstappen third, same lap time as Lando Norris. Verstappen and Red Bull also looking very good. And Verstappen, we know, is going to be right in the fight for pole position. The Red Bull car always was going to be a bit quicker here than it was in Monaco. I wouldn't say it looks as good for Red Bull as it was in, say, Imola. But I think Max is, definitely in the fight for pole position today. The Red Bull car looking good. And it will be very close to those McLarens. And then, Charles Leclerc, 5th and a full half second behind Piastri. Now, Ferrari, we know, on a Friday, tend to push a bit more than other teams do, which is why I believe Ferrari are nowhere in terms of their pace. The handling is pretty poor, and which has been talked about by not just Lewis Hamilton, who was complaining about that on the team radio. Nico Rosberg, who is at the Grand Prix this weekend and working on behalf of Sky Sports F1, he was trackside yesterday and said the Ferrari car looked the worst out of the entire field through the corners. So that Ferrari is not handling well at all. And I think Ferrari this weekend, at least in qualifying, I think they're a midfield team. I don't think they're anywhere near McLaren, Red Bull, or Mercedes. Those 3 teams are miles ahead of where Ferrari are at. Again, at least in qualifying terms. So yeah, Ferrari not in good shape at all. And then Antonelli just behind Leclerc. Antonelli, though, I'm pretty sure will be ahead of Leclerc as long as Antonelli doesn't make any mistakes. Because again, the Mercedes is clearly quicker than the Ferrari. And then you've got Fernando Alonso, 7th, Aston Martin, continuing their good form in terms of, the pace of the car over one lap has been pretty good since the race at Imola a couple of weeks ago. And they've just kept that up. Of course, though, especially with Fernando Alonso, they've been quite unlucky with Fernando, whether it's, strategy, engine issues, stuff like that. So, yeah, Fernando, hopefully this weekend, will be able to have some luck to finish in the points. But, yeah, Aston Martin car genuinely looks quick. Looks to me to be about the quickest midfield car, which is something we've not said about Aston Martin for quite a while. And honestly, again, I think, this may surprise people, but I think in qualifying they will be quicker than Ferrari. So, yeah, I would say Aston Martin, I think, probably 4th quickest. Which, again, Aston Martin have not had one of the top 4 quickest cars on the grid since, early last season. So definitely have made improvements with this car. I think one thing that has helped Aston Martin this year, we have seen with Aston Martin in the last couple of years, the big issue has been development. their new wind tunnel has been operational, I think, since March. So if that new wind tunnel is responsible for any upgrades that have gone onto the car since, say, the beginning of the season, then I think that is the reason why Aston Martin have stepped up a level from where they were in the first few races, where they weren't really anywhere pace-wise. So, yeah, that is good to see from Aston Martin. And keep an eye on them this weekend, especially with Alonso. They're going to be pretty strong pace-wise. Pierre Gasly 8th, again proving that Alpine around street circuits are terrible, but around proper circuits, they have genuinely good pace. So yeah, good to see Gasly up in the top 10. And then the two racing bulls of Hadjar and Lawson. Good to see Lawson still maintaining good pace. Hadjar still having good pace and still in good form, which is great to see. But yeah, the midfield, I think, is consisting of Aston Martin, Ferrari. Again, I would put in the midfield. I don't believe their car is good at all. Alpine, Racing Bulls, Williams, of course. So yeah, the midfield looking pretty close and pretty exciting. One thing I will say though, before we move on to the rest of the field, that lap time by Piastri, a 1:12.7, honestly, I thought was a bit slow for practice 2. Now, Piastri did do a 1:12.3 in practice 3, which is now the quickest time of the weekend so far. Still, though, I expect more because pole position last year was a 1:11.3. So I was expecting them to be in the low 1-minute 12s in practice 2. Yeah. So, 1:12.7, that's just, I don't know if the tyres are a bit too hard compared to last year. Maybe the track is too hot. We have seen in certain circumstances when the track gets incredibly hot, it, cannot give up as much grip as it can when it's a bit cooler. Maybe that's it. But yeah, the lap times this weekend have not been as good as I expected. Maybe everyone is really just holding back until qualifying. And then, maybe we're going to get some absolutely blistering lap times. Pole position should be, at worst, a low 1:11. And when I say a low 1:11, I mean anywhere between a 1:11.0 and a 1:11.3. Anywhere between there is what, at worst, should be pole position. But really, coming into the weekend, I was expecting pole position to be a 1:10 point something. But it doesn't look like we're going to get to that level. So yeah, I am surprised at the slower pace we've had this weekend. But again, maybe the teams have got a lot more pace to show in qualifying. And then the rest of the field, Lewis Hamilton 11th. Yeah, Hamilton was complaining a lot about the handling of the car, saying that it just had no grip. And on board, watching the Ferrari at times, it did not look good at all. And that's why I believe Ferrari are in the midfield this weekend. Sauber, pretty quick there with Nico Hülkenberg. Great effort from Hülkenberg. That Sauber, though, has definitely stepped up a gear since the beginning of the European season. They've definitely improved by, I would say, a couple tenths of a second compared to the rest of the field. So yeah, good to see that from Sauber. Of course, this season doesn't really matter for them because they're going to be the Audi F1 team next season, but still good to see that they're actually trying. Yuki Tsunoda 13th. Tsunoda was a bit baffled as to why he was so slow compared to his teammate in practice, but if Max, let's say, takes pole, if Tsunoda is half a second or so away, Tsunoda should still have a good qualifying and probably qualify in the top 7, say, on the grid, which would be, I think, his best result for Red Bull in qualifying since he joined the team. So, yeah, I think Tsunoda, as long as Red Bull do have actually good pace in qualifying, then I don't see why Tsunoda can't get a good grid position. Maybe even get himself onto the third row of the grid, it is definitely not impossible. The biggest surprise, though, of the weekend, Williams, 14th and 15th. And as I'll show in a moment with the sector time data, they're not really quick in any part of the track. And yeah, it is surprising because they have been one of the best midfield teams regularly this season. And of course, they are dominantly ahead of all the other teams in the championship in that midfield battle. So yeah, don't understand why Williams are so slow. Again, we'll get into the sector time data in a moment to see just where they're losing the most amount of time. But yeah, disappointing with Williams so far. I think they will improve a tad in qualifying. I don't think they'll end up 14th and 15th, but given what I've seen so far, I don't think they'll make the top 10 unless one of their drivers can produce a really special lap. Sorry, by the way, for the silence. We're just having a quick drink. It is quite hot. Well, not hot, but it's quite humid in my part of the UK. So just give me, give me a bit of a break. If if I'm having to, go silent for a few seconds to have a drink of water, because I just need to keep myself hydrated in what is quite humid conditions. Lance Stroll, 16th, awful from him. Half a second away from his teammate around a track this short is just terrible. But it's Lance Stroll at the end of the day. What more do you expect? Bortoleto, definitely, I would like to see a bit more from Bortoleto. 17th and 3.5 tenths off the pace of his teammate is not good enough. Really, especially when you consider that Bortoleto has outqualified Hulkenberg, I think, what? Is it 3 times this season? So it's not like Bortoleto is constantly getting hammered by Hulkenberg. So, yeah, I think Bortoleto, if Hulkenberg is making Q3, then, or not Q3, if Hulkenberg makes Q2 and ends up where he is in practice 2, then really Bortoleto should be in Q2 as well. So we'll see if he can end up there today. And then Ocon 18th, Behrman 19th, and Franco Colapinto. What on earth are you doing? Nearly a second slower than Gasly. If he keeps this up, then they've got to get Doohan back in the car for the next Grand Prix in Canada, because look, Doohan didn't do that great at all in the car in his few races, but he was nowhere near this bad. He was not a second off the pace of Gasly. That is incredible that he's even that far off the pace. If Gasly's going to be making the top 10 today, then Colapinto should be really where Hulkenberg is in this order. 20th and nearly a second slower is just pathetic as far as I'm concerned. I don't care that, he's not had a ton of time in the car. I don't care. He's had 2 races before this weekend at 2 difficult racetracks, hasn't showed us anything, has crashed at Imola, and now this weekend is showing just absolutely dog shit pace. So yeah, he has got to step it up. In regards to Haas, by the way, I think they're probably going to have a better race than they'll have qualifying. But yeah, qualifying wise, I would be surprised if Haas got any of their cars out of Q1. They don't look like they've got really any pace over a single lap, I'm afraid. But those are the results of practice 2. Let's get into the sector time data. Now, the first sector, like the final sector, it's important to a degree, but it doesn't really show you who has a good car around this track and who doesn't. And also, the middle sector in general is just way more important than any other part of the lap. McLaren, though, very impressive for them to be not just quickest, but a tenth of a second quicker than the next best team. considering the first sector is flat out except for turn 1. So, yeah, that's impressive from McLaren. Ferrari looking a lot better in the first sector than really they are for most of the rest of the lap. Red Bull, pretty good in the first sector, given that I think they will be pretty much on the same pace as McLaren in the first sector in qualifying. And then Mercedes, a couple tenths of a second away from McLaren, which, yeah, that is a bit too far away. So definitely Mercedes can find some more pace in this part of the lap. And then Aston Martin, ahead of all the other midfield teams, not by much. Williams next, and then Alpine, Racing Bull, Sauber, and Haas, the slowest team. But again, the middle sector is the sector that really shows you who has a good car and who does not. And McLaren have the best car through this part of the lap. Not by much, but yeah, not really surprised that McLaren are the quickest. Mercedes, again, not very far behind, and neither are Red Bull. And that's why I'm saying that today in qualifying, it's going to be a very close fight between Red Bull, McLaren, and Mercedes for pole. Because I think once they all show their proper pace, I think they're all going to be about on similar pace. And it's going to come down really to, not entirely, but mostly the drivers as to who ends up where in that, say, top 4 on the grid. And then, impressively, Aston Martin only a tenth and a half behind McLaren and the quickest of the midfield pack. Racing Bulls just behind. Good pace from them. And then Alpine in 6th. Decent pace from them. And then Ferrari. 7th best team in the middle sector. And that is why they are looking the way they are this weekend. Because in the middle sector, and not even just the middle sector, in the corners, their car looks awful. The only redeeming quality is that because the final sector, you know, you've got those two very fast and almost flat out final 2 corners, and then the first sector, you know, is almost flat out as well. That's the only thing that's keeping Ferrari from being comfortably outside of the top 10 with both of their cars. Because in the corners, that car is horrible. It is. You know, they're lucky at this point to have the lineup they do. And, you know, Lewis Hamilton, it's not been great this season. I've, you know, made that clear at times that, you know, Hamilton has not been quite a lot of the time anywhere near quick enough compared to his teammate Leclerc. But, you know, with Leclerc also in that car, they are lucky to have that driver lineup. Because if they had, no disrespect, the lineup of Alonso and Stroll, I don't think they would make the top 10. Or if they did, it would be barely with the car they've got this weekend. It really is just terrible, is that Ferrari car. And I have, for qualifying, basically no hopes for Ferrari because the car, again, is just awful. And I don't see really what they can do today to get what would be even considered a decent result for them. I think the only result I think for Ferrari that you could consider decent is if they ended up on the second row of the grid, even in 4th place. But, you know, McLaren, Mercedes, and Red Bull, all 3 of those teams look clearly quicker than Ferrari around this track, at least again in qualifying trim. In race trim, Ferrari's pace actually looks a lot better and might actually be, I wouldn't say as quick as Mercedes, but not very far away from the pace of Mercedes over a you know, a race stint. But in qualifying trim, they look absolutely terrible. And this could be as bad today as what we saw at Imola. I don't think it will be. I think they will get a slightly better result than what they got at Imola. But it's definitely possible that they don't get a car in the top 10, especially if their drivers don't quite hook up the best of laps. So, yeah, I'm just not confident about Ferrari at all. And then you got Sauber. Williams, also not good enough from them. 4/10 of a second off McLaren in the middle sector, which, being slower than McLaren, that's fine. But to be 3.5 tenths off the pace of Aston Martin in the middle sector is nowhere near good enough. They need to find, really, in this part of the lap, I'd say another quarter of a second if they want to be at least fighting for Q3. But whether they can find that, who knows? And then the final sector, you've got two very pedestrian slow corners and then two very high-speed corners. McLaren, no surprise, the quickest. Mercedes, though, very much right on the pace with McLaren. Alpine, very quick in the final sector. I seem to remember, was it last year? Alpine were very quick in the final sector here in Spain. So, yeah, Alpine looking good once again. Ferrari, again, better in this part of the lap, but that's only because of how high speed the final couple corners are, where they can utilize their brilliant power unit to make them look a bit better than they actually are. So, yeah, still not great from them. Aston Martin, just after Ferrari, and only just had a Red Bull. Red Bull can definitely improve in this part of the lap, and I think they will. Not by a massive amount, but enough to be, properly competitive with, say, McLaren and Mercedes. Then you got Racing Bulls, Sauber, again, Williams. There's definitely a bit more time they can find here. Probably another 0.5 tenth, which would help, especially if they can find another quarter of a second in the middle sector. And then Haas, once again, the slowest team. And yeah, comfortably, Haas have, again, at least in qualifying trim, the slowest car. So, if I go back to these results, by the way, make sure to smash the like button if you haven't already. We're on 13 likes. Let's try and get up to 30 plus likes if we can in the next half an hour or so. That'd be great if we could do that. Yeah, just want to quickly, before I get into my predictions, just want to quickly go through what I think the pecking order is for qualifying. Now, I could be very wrong, especially when it comes to Ferrari, who, again, I don't have a good feeling about whatsoever for today. But I will predict, nonetheless, where I think McLaren, or where I think the field are going to be, or how it's going to shake out this weekend. Sorry, there's a noise going off in the background that I'll fix in a moment. But yeah, McLaren, even though it's going to be close in Q3, McLaren, I do think, have the best car still. Not by that much, though, I will say that. They're not absolutely miles ahead of the rest of the field. Second quickest, honestly, I would say it's level between Mercedes and Red Bull. I don't think there is really anything separating those two teams. So, yeah, I think McLaren are the quickest team, but I think it's only probably by a tenth or so over Mercedes and Red Bull. So yeah, cannot wait for qualifying, given how close I think it is. Fourth quickest, I would go Aston Martin. Fifth, I would go Alpine. And then sixth, honestly, I would go Racing Bulls. I just had a Ferrari 7th. Again, with Ferrari, it will be very close with them and Aston Martin, Alpine, and Racing Bulls. I'm not saying Ferrari are going to be miles away from the front of the midfield pack, but yeah, 7th best is where I think Ferrari will be. 8th best team looks like it is probably Sauber at the moment, ahead of Williams 9th. And then 10th Haas. But I do think in qualifying that it will probably swap around and Williams will probably be quicker than Sauber. But I'd be surprised if Williams turn it around to the point where they're, making it comfortably in the top 10. Anyway, before I get on to my final qualifying prediction, let me just quickly sort out this noise in the background. And I'll be back with you guys in a few moments' time. Right, that's all good. So that's all sorted. But anyway, yeah, let's get on to my final prediction for qualifying. And again, this qualifying prediction may surprise people, but this is just how I think it will play out. And I am going for Max Verstappen just about to take pole position here in Spain. Lando Norris, I think, will be very close to Verstappen in second. I think it'll be half a tenth separating Verstappen and Norris on the front row. George Russell will be very strong, and I think will just about pinch third from Piastri, who I think will end up fourth. The reason, by the way, I've gone with Norris ahead of Piastri is because Lando has been very quick here in qualifying the last couple of years. Piastri, not so much. I know he's been quick this weekend, Oscar, but yeah, I think Lando will still end up just about ahead in the end. Antonelli, I am going in fifth place. Yuki Tsunoda, I think, will just about get onto the third row of the grid in sixth. And then I'm going Alonso seventh, Gasly eighth, Hadjar ninth, and Charles Leclerc, the quickest Ferrari, no doubt he'll be the quickest Ferrari today, I think will only finish in 10th. And again, I know that that is a bold prediction, but I'm willing to put my neck on the line because I do not believe that Ferrari car is any good around this track. I really just don't believe in it. So, yeah, we will see. If I'm proven wrong, I'm proven wrong, but I just don't believe in that Ferrari car, I'm afraid. But let me know, guys, in the chat, what do you think is going to happen in qualifying? Who do you think will get pole? How do you think Ferrari will do? Do you think they'll be as poor as I think they'll do? Or do you think they'll be a bit better than that? Let me know in the live chat. And let me just get the timer back on screen, as we have got 57 minutes to go until qualifying is underway in Spain. So, yeah, make sure to let me know your thoughts out of qualifying in the live chat. And for the next, say, half an hour or so, I will read out your comments and see what you guys have to say. And then, obviously, not too long before qualifying, I'll make sure to do a roundup of the teams again and go through how I expect them all to do in qualifying. I'll do a reminder of my predictions for anyone who hasn't seen them yet. And then we'll get into the session itself. But yeah, quickly, before I read your comments, just want to say, again, make sure to smash the like button if you haven't already, because it does help the channel and the algorithm, and helps show me that you guys actually enjoy the content, so make sure to smash that like button. We are currently on 19 likes. Let's try and get up to 30 plus likes if we can in the next half an hour or so. And as well, make sure if you are new to the channel to subscribe for more content like this. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Or just click on my channel name, go to my homepage and click subscribe. And hit the notifications bell as well, so you're notified as to when I go live and upload videos, which is a decent amount over the course of the weeks. But before I come to you guys, again, just going to have a quick drink to hydrate, and then I will start going through some of your comments in the chat. So keep them coming, and I'll get to reading them in a moment. Right, so let's see what you guys have to say. And let me see where I will start. Hello to all you guys. Astro, Serugara, Polish Eddie, who says, hey, big guy, it's been a while since I stopped by. Yeah, I can't remember the last time you were in the chat, but yeah, good to see you. Hello to Brabham, to Laurie Rastogi as well. Laurie Rastogi, by the way, in the chat saying there's rumors going around that Perez could join Alpine next year. I'm not sure about that. I think he is going to go to Cadillac because of two reasons. One, I think Cadillac needs him more in terms of that experienced head in the team. But also, I think Cadillac will pay him more than Alpine will. And that is definitely going to be part of Perez's decision making. Perez, he's not at the point of his career where he can choose to go to, really any midfield team. He, he's at the point of his career where he knows he's probably, heading for retirement from motorsport in the next few years and, wants to get paid, whilst doing it. And especially, next year, if Cadillac are going to be terrible, you want to be paid a handsome amount for having to drive a terrible car, possibly. So, yeah, I think he'll be racing for the Cadillac team. Astros quali prediction: Piastri on pole, Norris second, Leclerc third, Russell fourth, Hamilton fifth, Antonelli sixth. That would be incredible for Ferrari if they ended up third and fifth, but yeah, absolutely no chance of that happening. And Astro saying Perez finished, surely. I think he's more than had his shot in the sport, even especially when so few seats, even with Cadillac coming in. I would disagree because I think, if you look at this season so far at Red Bull, with, Lawson being in the car for a couple of races, now Tsunoda, it's proving that Perez actually wasn't doing as bad as we probably all thought he was, and we probably should have been a bit more, um, well, a lot of the time, him getting eliminated in Q1 and that, yeah, it was poor, and him having crashes in qualifying again was bad. But I think him being half a second or so off the pace of Max, I don't think it, looking back in retrospect, I don't think there was anything wrong with that, given what we're seeing from Sonoda and his, replacements, since Perez has left. So yeah, I think Perez still has something to offer. And again, for Cadillac, I think, if he can still, if he still has enough pace to produce some good results, and the Cadillac car is good enough to get some good results, then, Perez could still, be useful for another 2 or 3 years. I don't think Perez is totally finished to the point where he would be, completely unuseful to a team like Cadillac. Astro says Alpine did say they were rotating drivers, so I do think and hope they'll bring Doohan back. He deserves a decent go. If I was running that team, I would have Doohan back in for the next Grand Prix in Canada because he will not do any worse than Colapinto. Yeah, Doohan might have a couple accidents here or there, but he will not be a second a lap almost off the pace of Gasly. That won't happen. Doohan, I think, in practice too, I think Doohan probably would have been in between the Williamses, probably, which still wouldn't have been that good, and and wouldn't have been really good enough, but it would have been way more encouraging than Colapinto last on the grid. So yeah. Brabham says McLaren 1-2 and Max third for his prediction. We have another one from Lohart, is it? I can't quite see the font of the username is a bit weird, but their prediction is Norris for pole, Piastri second, and then Russell, Leclerc, Verstappen, Hamilton, Hadjar, Antonelli, Alonso, and Lawson. Astro asking, would any driver want to go to Alpine right now? I get what you mean, but if you look, at next year, Alpine will have Mercedes power units, and if the rumor is true, we'll find out next year. If the rumor's true, Alpine could have the best power unit on the grid, and might be one of the top 4 or 5 teams on the grid if they can then produce a good enough chassis and aero package to go along with that. So that's why Alpine is still a team to consider if you're a driver in the midfield, because again, they'll have Mercedes power, which might be really good to have for a 3 or 4 year period. We'll have to see, but yeah, that's the only reason why Alpine would be an option. If Alpine, if they were going into 2026 with what the original plan was from Renault, where Renault were going to, make their own engine and they're, still going to be the works Renault team, basically. That's what Alpine have been for years. Then I don't think anyone would go there, because I don't think anyone really had any hopes that Renault would get it right. The next set of regulations, and Renault themselves, I don't think had any faith, and that's why they pulled the plug. But I think Pierre Gasly is absolutely safe in that team. He's a very good driver, one of the best midfield drivers we've got in Formula One. So he is safe, and as long as the car is good enough to be in the points, say half the time, Gasly will score points and he will be good enough, let's say, will Pierre. But alongside him, if they want to be a strong midfield outfit, then Alpine need desperately, to find a reliable driver alongside Gasly. Yuki Tsunoda could be an option if Red Bull decide not to keep him long term, next year. Maybe an Isaac Hadjar, who, is French. So that would go well with the, obviously the team's French. Would be then 2 French drivers, which would make things easy in terms of relations and communication and all of that between the drivers. So, yeah, it'd be interesting to see what Alpine decide to do with their lineup, because I don't think next year, like I said, Pierre Gasly will be in that car, but Doohan and Colapinto will not be in Formula One next year, because both of them I don't think are good enough. So, yeah, we'll see who they decide to go with. Maybe throw in one of their academy drivers, Victor Martins or somebody like that, just to give them a go. Who knows? But Flavio Briatore, who is now the team boss of Alpine, which is just a disgrace that that's able to happen. Flavio should be nowhere near Formula One, and I don't know why there hasn't been more of a mess kicked up about that. The disgrace that it is that Flavio is allowed to run a Formula One team after what he did in 2008 with Crashgate. Flavio has come out and said that what is it, that he wants Alpine to be winning races in the next couple years. So if he wants that to be the case, he's going to have to get a much stronger lineup secured. And again, Doohan and Colapinto, I don't think will be a part of that. As Astro says, Crasher Pinto has had his share of accidents too. He has, but he's only had one in the Alpine when Doohan had what was it, 2 or 3 that I can remember. So I mean, that's the only thing you could say with Colapinto is that he hasn't crashed as much as maybe Doohan did in his first 3 weekends, but the pace has been a lot worse. Jim S says Colapinto brings money, so he's going to be there regardless next year. I don't think Alpine care about that, to be honest. Alpine, as much of a joke as a team they are, I don't think they are. They're not. That's not something they're looking for. It's only an extra bonus on top, really, for them. You know, if Colapinto is this regularly bad, they will get rid of him. I'm pretty sure of that. They're not gonna just keep him because, well, they get an extra however million from keeping him. I don't see that being the case at all. Reckon Flavio will keep Gasly. Yeah, like I said, Gasly is totally safe because, you know, he's been very reliable for Alpine in the last, well, ever since he joined, basically. Um, you know, it was a shame that the relationship with Esteban Ocon, you know, between Ocon and Alpine ended the way it did, because Ocon, you have to say, had a really great time at Alpine, won a Grand Prix, ended up on the podium. What was it? Was it twice? I think he did. But in general, Ocon did a great job. Well, no, 3 times he's on the podium. Yeah, Ocon did a great job with Alpine. As much as maybe some people don't like him, and I mean, the thing with Ocon is I've never disliked the guy. I've always thought that people have overrated him. Like, for example, when he came into Formula One and when he was at Force India in 2017, there were so many people out there that were rating Ocon as like the next almost Alain Prost, and were rating him as like he was going to be one of the next elite drivers in Formula One, when it just wasn't the case. He couldn't even beat Sergio Perez over the course of a season, when really, if you're going to be an elite driver, you have to be comfortably beating Perez week in, week out, and Ocon was not doing that. Ocon, though, you know, still did a very good job at Force India / Racing Point. Lost his seat, which obviously was bullshit. We know why he lost his seat, because Daddy Stroll took over Racing Point and then put his son in the team in 2019. Ocon is clearly better than Lance Stroll. That's not even up for debate. And then, yeah, Ocon spent a year on the sidelines, which was bullshit. There was talk of him possibly replacing Valtteri Bottas, which in the end, Mercedes decided to keep Bottas, which I still think was the right decision, because Bottas was still good enough for Mercedes for another couple of years and was very helpful for Mercedes. And I do think Bottas was better than Ocon, when Valtteri was at his peak compared to Ocon's peak. And then, yeah, Ocon came back with Renault. Didn't start that well with Renault, but eventually, you know, he got to grips with the car. And from the second half of the 2020 season on, Ocon again did, I think, a very good job at Alpine, but a lot of people won't give him the credit for it. And they'll instead focus on how much of a joke Alpine are, which, again, they are a joke, but I think we should give credit to Esteban Ocon for some of the really great results he got in that car, in that team, which is not as easy as it may seem, or as it seemed at the time. So, yeah, I think, yeah, if you look at Esteban's career, it's been a good career, but I think the only issue I have, which I don't think helped Ocon's especially earlier F1 career, is, again, he was way too overhyped. And I know why he was overhyped. It was because in Junior Formula, Ocon, I think, beat Verstappen in the, was it the F3 Euro F3 Championship? I understand why, but if you look on what he did in Formula One and based on what he's done in Formula One, Ocon has always been a really good midfield level driver. He's never been a an elite Formula One driver. He's always been one of those drivers that's hovered around 8th, 9th, and 10th at best in the whole Formula One field. That is Esteban Ocon. So yeah. And yeah, Astro earlier saying, I recall when Ocon was talked about as a replacement for Bottas as Lewis's teammate. Yeah, that was, I remember, I think I even made a video back in 2019 saying that, Mercedes should keep Bottas. And again, in hindsight, I think Mercedes did make the right decision because Valtteri was better than Ocon back then. And again, if you were to compare prime Valtteri Bottas to prime Esteban Ocon, I would take Valtteri Bottas because the qualifying pace that Bottas had was a lot of the time stunning. But yeah, I think despite maybe not getting that seat, which would have helped him maybe secure, I don't know, 2 or 3 extra wins to his name, Ocon again has still had a great Formula One career considering the cars he's driven and the teams he has raced for. Bravum says, "Yeah, Yuki to Alpine makes more sense the more I think about it." And the big reason why I like Tsunoda to Alpine is obviously, he would then link back up with Pierre Gasly, who we know those two are really good friends. They were teammates at AlphaTauri for a couple years, and if they were to both perform at their absolute best in that Alpine would have a pretty good lineup compared to the rest of the midfield. But sadly, at the moment, Alpine have only got one driver that could actually do anything for them on a semi-consistent basis, and that is Pierre Gasly. Let me see if I can find some other comments here that I've not read so far. And just having a look to see if I can find any other predictions as well. As I think Lohar earlier saying, "Damn, bro, really doesn't like Ferrari." Not that I don't like Ferrari. I've no problem with Ferrari. The car is. I still think a lot of Ferrari fans won't admit just how bad that Ferrari car is. And I think Monaco, what happened in Monaco last week with Ferrari, will have, to a degree, papered over the cracks. Because that car, yeah, it was good last weekend, but Monaco is not really a barometer of how quick your car, genuinely can be. Or, most of the time. We've seen it before with other teams who, will be super quick in Monaco, but then be not really that quick at all at other races. Talking of Alpine, I remember a couple of years ago in 2023, at street circuits, Alpine were pretty quick, but at actual circuits, Alpine didn't really have a lot of pace. So, yeah, I think last week again has papered over the cracks a bit as to the problems that Ferrari have and the reason they are where they're at. And yeah, that's why Ferrari are in the position they're in, and obviously, way away from being able to fight for the championship. Laurie Rostogi says, one thing that goes unnoticed when Bottas was on form, he was almost unbeatable. Yeah, he was. Sorry, let me just adjust my chair a second. Valtteri Bottas, like you said, when he was on form, he was stunningly quick driver. He really was. He was electrifying at times. In terms of what his best ever performance was, probably Suzuka 2019, I think it was, where he outqualified and outraced Hamilton and won the race by, I think, like 15 seconds or something. I think that was the absolute peak Valtteri Bottas that race weekend. But yeah, when he was on form, especially on a Saturday, he was very hard to stop, and I think that's what made Mercedes so not unbeatable but so hard to beat, is that obviously Lewis Hamilton they had at the time, who that was his peak years, and Hamilton still for me is the greatest of all time. But Hamilton's teammate Bottas was regularly close to Hamilton, especially in qualifying, which would make it hard if you were a Red Bull or a Ferrari driver to even get on the front row of the grid, because you had two incredibly quick qualifiers in the Mercedes car. Now, yeah, in a race situation, Valtteri Bottas was, sometimes he was decent, sometimes he was really poor, but yeah, over a single lap, Valtteri was, again, absolutely brilliant. And I think when people look back in, say, 10 years from now, I think people will look back fondly, very fondly, at Valtteri Bottas, the same way they do at, say, a Rubens Barrichello, in terms of a driver that was a brilliant number two driver to the clear number one. And, Valtteri in general was just incredibly talented. But unfortunately for him, he had Lewis Hamilton as a teammate, which was, always an incredibly hard thing for anyone to be. Never mind him, but especially when he was teaming with Hamilton, when Hamilton was at his best. Bravo Moss says, I can't see Ferrari being capable of winning a world championship, world drivers championship for a long time. I mean, it all comes down to next year, doesn't it? If Ferrari start next year miles off the pace, then they're in trouble. They're in big trouble. I mean, this year being a failure, you can excuse it to an extent, because obviously, again, next year there's a complete rules reset. And if you look at Frederick Vasseur, the team boss, this is only really his second season as team principal, because in 2023 he had basically no effect on the car, and he was not able to put certain engineers in place that could actually make a difference with the car on the in 2023, and he couldn't really have an effect in that way until 2024, which wasn't perfect from Ferrari, but that Ferrari car last year, fundamentally, it was a good car. The only problem is they didn't quite get the development right, especially this time last year. That's really where they failed with the car. But other than that, it was a good season, especially compared to 2023. But then obviously coming into this year, massive hype, aura, all of that bullshit, and they have, completely shit the bed. But I think, looking at Frederick Vasseur, if he does not, let me rephrase it. If Ferrari are not in a good position next year, then I think Frederick will and probably should get the boot. Because in terms of getting the right engineers and the right staff in place to make a good car for the next set of regulations, he would have had enough time to do that. He would have had, 2.5 years to be able to do that. So if he... And that's pretty much what his reorganization has been about. It's not just been about for the short term, it's been for the long term as well, going into 2026 and all of that. And again, if it ultimately that doesn't work and Ferrari produce a dud next year, then I think Vasseur has to go. And then at that point, Ferrari will have to start all over again and have another rebuild. But, we will see. I really hope Ferrari are not way off the pace next year. That would be quite depressing. Anyway, before I read any more comments out, let me just quickly post a link of the stream out one final time before we go any further. Hopefully we get some more people joining us soon. Come join us here to Watchalong an epic qualifying in Spain. And there you go. So we'll see if we get some more people joining us. So, yeah. I'll probably read out a couple more comments and then we'll go on to the teams quickly. Just I'll do a quick roundup as I usually do of the teams and where they should be in qualifying. And then I'll remind you guys as to what my prediction is for the session. And then we'll be not very far away from getting into the session. Astro says, feel sorry for Ferrari now. Would really love to see them return to serious title contenders. I wouldn't feel sorry for them. That they are the reason that they are in the position they're in. They just fucked up with this year's car. What I don't get is why they didn't build on the success of last year's car. Because again, fundamentally, last year's car was good. The issue was the development. It wasn't the fundamental baseline they had with the car. But for this year's car, decided to go in a different direction and be a bit more radical for no reason, really. When, if you look at McLaren, I think McLaren have just stuck by what already made their car good and just built upon that. When Ferrari have decided to go a different direction and it's not worked. Let's see if I can find some other comments here that I've not seen. But actually, going back to Brabham's comment about Ferrari not winning a driver's championship for a while. I mean, Lewis Hamilton is only going to be at Ferrari probably for a couple years, and then he's probably going to dip. I don't think Hamilton is around for the long term. Again, though, if Ferrari mess up next year's car, at what point, if you're Charles Leclerc, at what point do you say enough and decide to look elsewhere? There is a rumor that he has a release clause in his contract dependent on performance. Not sure. I mean, I would imagine he does have a release clause depending on performance, but I don't know what that release or that performance, what type of performance would trigger him being able to leave his contract. But if Ferrari, let's say next year's regulations play out almost exactly like they did in 2014, which was the last time we had a big change in the engine regulations. Ferrari in 2014 were awful. They were absolutely diabolical. Didn't win a race, only had a couple podiums. They had the 5th best car at best. Was it the 5th best car? Yeah, maybe 4th best, but a lot of the time it was 5th best as well. Sometimes even 6th best. If it's like that, then Leclerc, I think, has got to look elsewhere. The thing is, though, is where would Leclerc be able to go? He won't be able to go to McLaren. I think McLaren have got their drivers absolutely nailed down. To be at McLaren probably for the rest of the decade. Max Verstappen is going to be at Red Bull. I think next year, maybe not after that though. So maybe Red Bull could be an option. Mercedes could be an option because if Russell or Antonelli isn't quite performing to the standard they want, maybe if Leclerc is on the market, they'll decide to pull that trigger and put Leclerc in one of their seats. Obviously, you've got Aston Martin, a team with lots of potential. Maybe Leclerc could go there. So, if Ferrari, again, if they don't quite show up next year, be interesting to see with Charles Leclerc what he decides to do. I did make a video 3 years ago, and it was, I think, almost exactly 3 years ago, after Leclerc had an engine failure in Baku after a string of awful races, which were mainly down to his team. I did make a video saying Leclerc must leave Ferrari. Now, that was at a time where his contract was coming up to an end a couple years later, which was at the end of 2024. He ended up signing a new contract, I think, midway through 2023 to take him, I think, up to the end of the 2020s decade. End of 2028 or 2029, something like that. The only way Leclerc should consider long-term staying with Ferrari is if consistently they can produce a car that can fight for the championship. And if that is not possible, then again, Leclerc, really, to save his career, has got to look elsewhere. Because let's say his contract is up at the end of 2029. In 2029, Charles Leclerc is going to be 32 years old. He's 27 at the moment, turns 28 in October. So, by the end of this decade, Leclerc could potentially be 32, have maybe 3 or 4 more wins to his name, but 0 championships, and wouldn't have probably fought for a championship still because of how bad Ferrari are. And surely at that point, Leclerc is going to look elsewhere. Because if Leclerc actually wants to win a championship, then at that point, he will have to leave the Ferrari team. I know it's his boyhood team, the team that he's been with for so long. He wants to win a championship with Ferrari. I get that. But if they're not giving him what he requires and what he deserves, really, because he is one of the best drivers in the world, then he has every right to look elsewhere. I mean, look at Lewis Hamilton when he left McLaren. McLaren were not producing good enough cars for him and were not performing to the standard required to be championship material. So Hamilton looked elsewhere, took a risk, and it paid off big time. Maybe that's something Leclerc needs to do. Anyway, before I go on to any more of your comments, make sure to keep them coming. I will read probably a few more out before I get into qualifying. Let me just hide the timer quickly, as I want to do a quick roundup of the teams and how I think they should all do in qualifying. So, for McLaren, again, I think they've got the quickest car, but I don't think it's by that much. It's by a tenth, maybe 0.2 of a second at most. It's pretty close. It's similar here to what we saw at Imola between McLaren, Red Bull, and Mercedes in qualifying. It is very close, no doubt about it. So McLaren, as long as their two drivers can produce their absolute best laps, pole position is absolutely there for them. Maybe a front row as well, even though it's going to be very close between them and the Red Bull of Verstappen and the Mercedes of Russell. But the car is good enough. It's just about the drivers. Can they produce good enough laps in comparison to their rivals? That's what's going to decide it today for McLaren. For Red Bull, they've definitely got a good car. It's not the best car, but it's definitely good enough to fight for pole. And Max Verstappen, we know that when he's at his best, which is basically all the time, he is able to get these pole positions. We saw it at Suzuka, saw it in Saudi Arabia, was so close at Imola. Obviously, in the end, delivered the race win anyway. But the car is definitely there to fight for pole. And Max, we know, around this racetrack is incredibly quick. So watch out for Max Verstappen, who could very well be taking pole today. And if Verstappen is on pole, then really Yuki Tsunoda should be in the top 10. And not only in the top 10, but probably hovering around 6th, 7th, at worst, let's say 8th on the grid. That's where Tsunoda, that's the area, let's say, he needs to be. He's not going to be anywhere near pole, but he should be definitely in the top 10. So watch out for Tsunoda. But yeah, Red Bull took pole here, of course, a couple of years ago with Max Verstappen, and it's definitely a possibility today. Ferrari, again, I don't have good hopes for them. I think they're a midfield team, and I think they'll be stuck in the midfield pack, fighting Aston Martin, Alpine, Racing Bulls, and Williams. And I don't think they'll end up very quick compared to the rest of those teams. I think they'll get a car into Q3. I don't think they get both cars into Q3. I think Lewis Hamilton, because of his unhappiness with the car and lack of pace compared to Leclerc so far this weekend, I think Hamilton gets eliminated in Q2. Leclerc, though, will make Q3, but again, will not be very quick whatsoever. Not because he's not quick enough, but because the car is dreadful. Mercedes, I think they can get pole. I just ultimately don't think they will. I just don't think they have got all together just about enough to do it. They've got a very quick driver in their car who we know over a qualifying lap can be, very special. But I think that Mercedes is just slightly too slow compared to, Max in the Red Bull, and we know Max is just that slight bit quicker than Russell in the Mercedes, which I think will help Verstappen and Red Bull be able to probably just about get pole position. Russell, again, will be very close to pole, will be right in that fight, but I just don't see him being able to get it. But the top 3 is possible for Mercedes, and if they were to get it, that would be a fantastic result for the Mercedes team. Hopefully Antonelli doesn't make any mistakes today and delivers the best lap he can, because Antonelli really should be in the top 5 of the grid. Now let's go on to the midfield teams. Aston Martin should have a car in the top 10. Fernando Alonso is looking very quick. Watch out for him. He should be one of the top midfield runners in qualifying today, and I think he'll end up as the best midfield runner in qualifying today. Lance Stroll should do a lot better, but he won't because he's Lance Stroll. For Alpine, all their hopes are on Pierre Gasly, who is looking quick this weekend. I think Gasly will make the top 10 as long as he nails his laps in Q2. Franco Colapinto, as I've said, has got to step up and should be, at worst, making Q2. If he gets eliminated in Q1, then that is nowhere near good enough from the Argentine. Sorry about the coughing there. On to Haas F1. I think tomorrow in the race, they'll actually be decent. But today, I just don't think they've got enough pace in that car, I'm afraid. Maybe if one of their drivers produces a really special lap, they can get into Q2. But that would be the absolute best I think they can do today. Racing Bulls, watch out for them. Still looking quick. Isaac Hadjar consistently still in the top 10, having a brilliant season. Obviously now in the top 10 of the championship is Isaac. And I think he will yet again make Q3, so watch out for Isaac. And also watch out for Liam Lawson, who is definitely continuing his great form from Monaco and needs to if he wants to keep that seat going forward. But yeah, watch out for the Racing Bulls. Williams, I think, will improve on what they've shown so far this weekend, but I don't think they'll make Q3. The car in the middle sector especially just is not quick enough. And for Sauber, watch out for Nico Hulkenberg, who's been pretty good this weekend. Sauber definitely have stepped up a degree, and they should be decent in qualifying, but I don't think they're going to be anywhere near, unfortunately, Q3. And here's a reminder of my top 10 prediction for qualifying with the predicted gaps as well. Max Verstappen, I think, will take pole by half a tenth from Lando Norris second, George Russell third, Piastri fourth, Antonelli fifth, Tsunoda sixth, Alonso seventh, Gasly eighth, Hadjar ninth, and yes, Charles Leclerc, I think, will be at best 10th in the Ferrari. We'll see if he and the team can prove me wrong, but I'll just wait for the next minute to tick over, which it just has now. And there you go. 11 minutes to go until qualifying begins in Spain. Give me your final thoughts in the chat as to what you think is going to happen, and I'll get to some of them before we get underway. Let me see. Let me see where I can start from when I read out some of these final comments. Ray Caesar, I think it is, says, totally agree with your comment on why they did not build upon last season's car. They almost became Constructors' Champion with it down to the last race. Yeah, it wasn't... last year's Ferrari, again, was not a bad car. The only reason they didn't win the Constructors' Championship was because around this time last year, they messed up the development for about a few weeks. They did get on top of it after the summer break, just after the summer break. But fundamentally, the car was good. It won, how many races? I think 6 race wins they had. Yeah, it was a good car. Again, they just messed up the development in the the summer months of the season, and that's why they ended up not winning it. If they had not messed it up, the development in June, July of last year, Ferrari would have won the Constructors' Championship. I have no doubt about that. But no, for some reason, they decided, Ferrari, to, I guess, go radical with their design for this year's car to try and have not only the best car, but the best car by miles, but it ended up not working whatsoever. Um, let's see if I can find some final comments here. As well, make sure to smash that like button. We're on 35 likes. Let's try and get up to 50 likes if we can in the next, say, 20 minutes or so. Jorge says for their prediction, Piastri, Lando, Max, Leclerc, Russell for their top 5. And also says Hamilton is making too much money, will not retire unless they fire him. I see what you mean, but I think Lewis has enough self-awareness to know, when to stop, especially if he is way too slow. So yeah, I think he'll. I don't think he'll hang on way too long if he is, way past his prime. But we'll see. So regarding Piastri equals Raikkonen, putting that on a t-shirt when I can. Yeah, Piastri, very cool customer. Not quite as interesting a character as Kimi Raikkonen, but similar in how cool he is behind the wheel and how talented as well. Well, not quite as talented as Kimi was, but you get my point. Will F1 says, in terms of pure driving talent, Alonso is the second best driver in the last 30 years, only behind Schumacher. I'm not sure about that. I think Alonso, yeah, he's definitely one of the best talents we've seen in the last 30 years, but I'm not sure he's the second best talent. Be an interesting debate, but I'm not sure I'd say second best with him. But yeah, incredibly talented. There can be no doubt about that. And Sheikah says George Russell pole incoming. Would be great if he got pole. Of course, Mercedes have not had a pole position this year. Of course, I'm not counting the sprint race because we don't count sprint races in terms of the qualifying sessions as being pole. So, yeah, be great to see that happen. And if George Russell still has, I wouldn't say delusions, but if he still has ambitions of fighting for the championship, then really he does need to at least finish on the podium here this weekend, if not probably win the Spanish Grand Prix, but not sure that Mercedes is quite quick enough to do that. But let me just quickly find one final comment and then we'll go on to this session. Chinonso, I think it is, says, I think this might be the biggest gap we see between McLaren and the other teams. Honestly, I'm losing faith in the Red Bull technical team. Give the Red Bull technical team a chance. They have improved the car. The car is definitely better since the race at Imola a couple of weeks ago. It's still not the best car, but it's definitely closed the gap to McLaren, no doubt about that. But the F1 intro is now beginning to play. And you know what that means. Time to get into qualifying. Let's get into a couple final bits of details, though, before we head into the session. Firstly, a reminder of the championship standings, of course, very important. Oscar Piastri comes into this session leading only by 3 points ahead of Lando Norris, who, of course, won last weekend in Monaco. Max Verstappen third, only 25 points off. really, all three championship contenders of Piastri, Norris, and Verstappen, all three of them desperately need to get pole position here. George Russell fourth. Again, if he can get pole, this might be a good chance for him to restart his championship bid. Charles Leclerc fifth. Hamilton sixth. Antonelli seventh. Alex Albon impressively eighth and only 6 points behind Antonelli. Esteban Ocon ninth. And into the top 10, Isaac Hadjar. On the constructor side, McLaren already way too far clear of the rest of the field, and they are going to win the Constructors' Championship. It's a matter of when, not if. Mercedes second, only 4 points though clear of Red Bull, who are only then 1 point clear of Ferrari. A very interesting fight shaping up for second in the championship. Williams in fifth, very far clear of the rest of the field. Haas in sixth, only 4 points clear of Racing Bulls, who had a brilliant Monaco Grand Prix. Aston Martin in eighth. Alpine ninth, and Sauber last of all. But let's get into some key stats regarding the front-running teams going into this session. McLaren, of course, their last pole in Spain was last year with Lando Norris, a spectacular lap by the Brit. And McLaren have taken pole in Spain only 3 times since the turn of the century, the year, obviously, 2000. One of those poles was in Valencia in 2009. So they've not had a lot of success in qualifying sessions in Spain. Last year, though, 1st and 10th, they were on the grid. Can they get pole yet again? For Red Bull, their last pole in Spain was 2 years ago, Max Verstappen, where Max absolutely destroyed the rest of the field a couple years ago. That is, though, their only pole position in Spain in the last 10 years. Red Bull, they've had a good record in the race at this Grand Prix, but in qualifying, not so much. And yeah, last year, 2nd and 8th, they were in qualifying. Ferrari's last pole was 3 years ago with Charles Leclerc. Back then, they had the best car on the grid. And that is their only pole in Spain in the last 10 years, just like Red Bull. Last year, 3rd row of the grid they locked out. I think they'd be pretty happy with that this weekend, given the struggles that are clearly there with that car. And for Mercedes, their last pole in Spain was in 2021, 4 years ago with Lewis Hamilton. Mercedes have been easily the most successful team in qualifying here in the last 10 years. 7 pole positions in the last 10 years here in Spain. And last year, 3rd and 4th they were in qualifying. Mercedes would be pretty happy with that if they got that today. And let's find out if they will. As Q1 will begin in about a minute from now. I'll sync up the timer at the 17-minute mark. Let me just get the graphics ready. There you go, with the cutoff line. And obviously, whoever is in the bottom 5 at the end of Q1 will be out in those positions. One key stat I just wanted to go through was in the last 4 qualifying sessions here in the here at the Spanish Grand Prix, we have had 4 different teams on pole. Last year, McLaren. The year before, Red Bull. Year before that, Ferrari. Year before that, Mercedes. So to keep that up, we'd need, Aston Martin or Alpine on pole position. But it shows you how not been, even though Mercedes, in the late part of the 2010s, coming into the 2020s, Mercedes were so dominant here in Catalunya. Since then, it's been very much up for grabs. As we've got a couple cars at the end of the pit lane, one of them being an Aston Martin, which I think is Lance Stroll. And there you go. Session has begun. Qualifying is underway in Barcelona. As we're looking at a Mercedes still in the garage of Antonelli. Mercedes, of course, not going to go out straight away. And, of course, because of how hot it is and how this track really wears out the tyres, you're only going to go for one flying lap, really, around this track. I think if you've got, fuel to burn off, you could do a couple laps in a row, but you'd need to have a lot of pace in hand, I think, to get away with that. But for the midfield team, certainly, they'll only be doing one run at a time. As they're... Oh, no. I forgot. I set it to the wrong thing. So, yeah. Sorry about that. Wait another 45 seconds and I'll get the timer on screen properly. As a packed house, of course, 2 Spaniards on the grid. And the home crowd will be hoping that, what do you call it? That both Alonso and Sainz can at least make the top 10. I think that'd be a good enough day for the home crowd. As we're looking at Esteban Ocon, who had such an incredible result last week in Monaco. 8th in qualifying and then 7th in the race in what was just one of the best drives of the whole weekend by anyone. Can he keep that up here in Spain? He's never really had, from what I remember, he's never really had that many great results here. Did finish 7th for Alpine 3 years ago after starting outside the top 10. That was probably one of the best results he's had here. Oh, actually, he finished 5th here for Force India, but he did also finish behind his teammate, so I think that was more because of the car, why he finished there that day. But yeah, he's been a bit hit and miss around this track, when in Monaco, he's always on it, so you don't quite know what you're going to get with Ocon. But Ocon just coming through turn 12, which is the third to last corner. Now comes through the final 2 corners, which are almost flat out, both of them. Well, the penultimate one is flat out. The final corner, you have to do a slight confidence lift, as Ocon goes quickest on a 1:14. Or no, he doesn't go quickest. He goes second on a 1:14.0. The quickest time in this session should be a low 1:12. So, if you want to get through to Q2, you're going to have to do a 1:12 point something, I think. Stroll's just at a 1:13.6. Albon goes second on a 1:13.7. So, yeah, Stroll and Albon obviously would not get through with those lap times. Those are too slow, definitely. So, Stroll, Albon, and Colapinto, your top 3. And then Ocon and Behrman, 4th and 5th. So, yeah, I think, again, if you do a 1:12 lap time, that should get you through to Q2. I think the slowest lap time you could do to get through to Q2 is probably a 1:13.1, 1:13.2. So, yeah, we'll see. But again, if you do a 1:12 point whatever, then I think that's good enough to get through to Q2 without doubt. Now, it's got a load of other cars now coming out. By the way, hello to no one that you know. Good to see you. By the way, we're almost on 50 likes. So let's make sure to get up to 50 likes if we can in the next couple minutes. As well, if you haven't voted in my poll at the top of the chat, make sure to do so still. That poll will run for another probably 40 minutes, 45 minutes. So if you still haven't decided who you think will get poll, then you've still got another 45 minutes to decide. And your options for the poll are Verstappen, Piastri, Norris, Russell. Talking to Max Verstappen, he is still in the garage. No surprise, Red Bull do tend to wait quite a bit with Max before releasing him. And Max is probably only going to do one lap in Q1 anyway. As we're looking at Carlos Sainz, who's on an outlap. And Sainz, even though he scored points in Monaco, I thought was disappointing in Monaco. And in general, I thought Williams were disappointing. Albon really should have been taking probably 6th on the grid. But Williams messed up qualifying, and then, I mean, in the race, they did the best they could with, holding others up to help each other out. But if they had qualified where they should have qualified, I think Williams could have had a very good point scoring effort from the Monaco Grand Prix. And like I said, Carlos Sainz being knocked out in Q2 last week was very disappointing, given Carlos's good record in Monaco. As we're looking at Hulkenberg and the Sauber, which has had a good weekend. And Hulkenberg, not doing a great lap so far. Not terrible, but it's not great. As now Max Verstappen, the only car in the pits. Well, actually, Ocon and Behrman and Stroll. Well, Behrman and Stroll now in the pits as well, but they've done a lap. Here comes Hulkenberg, who goes quickest onto a 1:13.499. But again, that still will be too slow to make it through to Q2. As Bortoletto goes 5th for Sauber. Carlos Sainz, a 10th off on Hulkenberg after the first 2 sectors. So this is a decent run from Sainz. Let's see what the final sector's like. Liam Lawson goes slightly quicker than Hulkenberg. As Carlos Sainz comes to the line, does not have a good final sector and goes a 10th slower than Lawson. Yeah, not a good lap there for Carlos. As Antonelli slightly wide at the final corner, but he goes quickest, but it's only a 1:13.3. That's not a good lap time from Antonelli. Here comes Lando Norris, who's a 1:12.7, and that is a lot more like it. So Lando is already, I think, good enough to get through to Q2 with that, even though he could improve in this session by quite a bit, as George Russell goes a James Bond of a second slower than Lando Norris. So Russell is now second. Isaac Hadjar has gone 3rd. Decent start for the young Frenchman. Put himself ahead of fellow rookie Antonelli. Oscar Piastri comes to the line and goes 1/4 of a second quicker onto a 1:12.5. That's only a couple tenths slower than the best time of the weekend so far. As Alonso is on a good run, as Albon has improved massively up to 4th. That's a lot more like it from Williams, and Alonso goes slightly slower in 5th place. As Lewis Hamilton only goes 6th onto a 1:13.1, I think that was. Leclerc does a 1:13.0 and goes 4th. As Colapinto goes up to 9th and is technically, well, he is. Never mind, technically, he is ahead of Pierre Gasly for the moment, which is good to see. As Max Verstappen is on his first flying run, what can he do? He's He's completed the middle sector, but he's not really going that quick, I must say. As Verstappen comes around the final corner, this will not be the quickest time, but he does go a quarter of a second slower than Piastri, only a thousandth of a second quicker than Norris. Here comes Lance Stroll, who only goes 14th. That lap time, a 1:13.4, that still is not going to be good enough for Stroll if he wants to get through to Q3, or Q2, sorry. But it's currently Piastri with 6.5 minutes to go in Q1. It's Piastri leading from Verstappen, Norris, Russell, Leclerc, Albon, Alonso, Hamilton, Hadjar, and Behrman has put himself in P10 with an impressive time, I must say. And then Colapinto 11th, Antonelli 12th. Antonelli has got to step up here because his first lap time was not good. Gasly, surprisingly behind his teammate Colapinto in 13th, and then Stroll 14th. Lawson 15th, and then in the drop zone, Hulkenberg, Ocon, Sainz, Tsunoda, and Bortoleto. But looking at the field, I would say yeah, I'd say anywhere from Lewis Hamilton in 8th down is at risk of being eliminated. I think Alonso, with that lap time of a 1:13.1, I think it is. I think that's just about good enough from Fernando to get through. But Hamilton, I think, is, yeah, probably the highest driver at risk. So, potential for a couple of surprises. Of course, we've got a Red Bull in the drop zone at the moment, so that is a surprise. And obviously, Sainz in the drop zone is a surprise. But Antonelli in the Mercedes, if he doesn't get his final lap right, he very well could be out in the first part qualifying, which would be a disaster yet again for the young Italian. As we're looking here at Lando Norris on an outlap, which is pointless because McLaren are going to get through. But, I mean, this is just to develop confidence through qualifying with the car. And same for Oscar Piastri, who's now on an outlap. And everyone, I'm pretty sure, will come out onto track. But again, Alonso in 7th. Anyone from Alonso up is safe. I'm pretty sure about that. I mean, Lewis Hamilton should be okay as well. But I think, if everyone else improves and he doesn't, I think he might just get eliminated there in 8th. It's going to be close. But yeah. Cannot wait to see what happens in these final runs. Hopefully no yellow or red flags. Because, again, we could get a couple real surprises here. And we just saw Colapinto on the radio. Colapinto, again, impressively, now ahead of Gasly, as a Williams there just overtook the Alpine. But I'm not sure if the Williams... Was he allowed to do that? I'm not sure. But I think... Oh, no. So they're all overtaking Colapinto. Yeah, Colapinto's got a problem. They're all overtaking Colapinto. So Colapinto has got a problem with his car. And with only 2 minutes 45 left in the session, they're not going to fix that. So Colapinto, I think, really is out of qualifying. Because there's no way, unless we get a yellow flag or red flag that really works out well for him, there's no way he is going to make it into Q2 if the lap time is already done. Absolutely no chance. So that's a shame for Colapinto. Starts to put it together, and then his car fails him. Bortoleto, though, we're looking at, can he get himself into Q2? Something he's done in the past couple races. Been decent in qualifying this year, Bortoleto. It's just the races where he's not really shown anything. But he's half a second up on Lawson after the first couple sectors. And this lap, if he keeps it up and he does go half a second quicker than Lawson, I think this lap will be good enough to get him through, as Hulkenberg, his teammate, goes 8th. Where does Bortoleto go? 7th. Brilliant lap by Bortoleto. As Antonelli, now on his final run of Q1, can he do enough to get himself through to the purple middle sector? So surely he will pop himself a lot higher up the field, as Sainz is on a lap. And Antonelli, yep, goes 5th. So Antonelli is safe. As Isaac Hadjar only goes 10th. That might just be enough for Hadjar. As we're looking at Carlos Sainz, who's done a decent first sector, but the middle sector is going to tell us a lot more, as Gasly goes 9th, and Sainz, he's a couple tenths up on Colapinto, who's, yeah, definitely going to get eliminated here. But I'm not sure this lap is still that good. As Sainz, through the final couple corners, can he drag this Williams into Q2? To the line! He goes 13th, and that might be good enough to get him into Q2. It's going to be incredibly close. As we're now looking at Liam Lawson, who, based on the lap times he's doing so far, looks like he might be able to get through. Hamilton up to 9th. Hamilton is definitely through. Here comes Lawson, who goes 7th. What a lap by the Kiwi. So both racing balls are through. As that's an Alpine that's parked next to the track. I think that's Colapinto. I'm not quite sure. Yeah, it is Colapinto. As here comes Esteban Ocon in 19th. Can he get himself into Q2? He does! And can anyone else improve? Yep, his teammate, Oliver Behrman, now comes around the final corner. Can he put himself ahead of Ocon? Yes, he does. Oliver Behrman goes 11th and pushes his teammate out. Here comes Tsunoda, though, who's still in the drop zone. Surely Tsunoda can get himself out. To the line. No, Tsunoda only 19th. What a shocking lap that is. As Stroll goes 7th, which pushes Nico Hulkenberg out in Q1. And also out in Q1, Carlos Sainz. I said it was going to be close, and it was. He missed Q2 by 0.07 of a second. That lap time from Sainz just wasn't good enough. And that is Q1 over and done with. Let's go through the drivers that have made it through to the second part of qualifying. Piastri, Verstappen, Norris, Russell, Antonelli, Leclerc, Stroll, Lawson, Albon, Bortoleto. Great job, by the way, by Bortoleto. Qualifying Hulkenberg, I think, for the 3rd race in a row. Hamilton, Behrman, Gasly, Alonso, and Hadjar knocked out in Q1. Nico Hulkenberg, Esteban Ocon, Carlos Sainz, 18th. Franco Colapinto, 19th. And Yuki Tsunoda in the Red Bull, last of all. And yeah, I said there'd be a couple shocks. And yeah, Sainz and Tsunoda being eliminated is definitely a couple shocks. There's no doubt about that. Tsunoda, though, I know he's been a bit baffled as to why he's been losing pace, but that was a shocking effort from Tsunoda. Absolutely shocking, as far as I'm concerned. Tsunoda did a 1:13.3, whilst Max did a, 1:12.7. Still 0.6 off, like he has been pretty much all weekend. But yeah, Tsunoda should have made his way through there, as far as I'm concerned. But that is the way it is, unfortunately. As Q2 will be underway in a couple minutes, and will be a 15-minute long session where we'll knock out the next 5 drivers. And this is where it's going to get very interesting, because the field is so close, especially in the midfield. It's not a guarantee that we are going to get, just the midfield runners being eliminated. We could get a couple surprises here. So, yeah. Keep your eyes peeled on this session, because this could get very exciting. As Rooks saying in the chat, by the way, good to see, mate. Hope you're doing well. Saying Tsunoda's car is nothing like Max's. Max gets the upgrades a week earlier because of the crashes. Yuki's on an old spec chassis too, I heard. He is, but he still should have got through to Q2 there. But I mean, yeah, he's not being helped by Red Bull. Super Kev, good to see you. Says, always said that you could be ruining his career at Red Bull. Whoever steps into that second Red Bull is just guaranteed ruination at this point. As we've just seen a replay of Carlos disappointingly saying, yeah, that's not good, after his engineer confirmed to him that he ended up 18th. I'm pretty sure that's the worst qualifying result Carlos Sainz has ever had at this Grand Prix. In his debut season here 10 years ago in the Toro Rosso, remember, he qualified 5th ahead of Max Verstappen, his teammate. And I'm pretty sure Sainz has made Q3 here in Spain in, I think, every Spanish Grand Prix that we've had here at the Circuit De Catalunya since he came onto the grid. 2015, 2016, 2017, was it 20? Yep, 2017 he made Q3. 2018 he made Q3. 2019, I don't think he did. So maybe that was the only other session where he didn't make Q3. But he's had such a good record here. Of course, it's his home Grand Prix. Yeah, that is... I know the Williams is not very quick this weekend compared to what it's been like recently, but that is a poor effort from Sainz, especially when Albon got into 9th place. So yeah, awful from Carlos. Dane says, I think that is Bortoleto out-qualified Hulk in last 2 or 3 races. I think it might be 3 in a row, but it is at least 2 out of the last 3. But yeah, Bortoleto, again, as I said earlier in Q1, in qualifying, he's doing a great job. He really is, but it's just he hasn't figured out, I think, the races and how to conduct himself there. But he's got the speed. The speed is not up for debate as to whether he has that. It's just the race pace, let's say, as there is an Aston Martin quickly finding their way around a Williams. It's I think Fernando Alonso. As yeah, Q2 is underway, guys. I'll sync up the timer in about 25 seconds as we're looking at the yellow helmeted Ferrari of Lewis Hamilton, who is about to come out of the garage in probably the next couple moments. There is Valtteri Bottas, who is the third or reserve driver for Mercedes. He's also, I think, the test driver for all the other Mercedes-powered teams. So, even though he's not on the grid anymore, he is a very busy boy. And who knows, maybe he will be on the grid next year for Cadillac. Wouldn't be a bad option. Bottas, last year, yeah, he wasn't good, but he was in a bad car. So it wouldn't be the worst option in the world, especially if the car is decent. As Alonso has come back into the pits. No idea why. Unless there's a problem with his car. But anyway, we'll see. Hopefully not, because he has had zero luck this season. As here is Alex Albon on his first run in Q2. If Albon can make it through to Q3, that would be a super effort, given Williams' lack of pace this weekend. In this session, though, the best time we should be seeing should be a 111.7, not a 111.7. I'd say anywhere between a 111.7 and a 111.9 is probably the best lap time we will see in this session. To get through, though, to Q3, you're going to have to do a 1 minute 12.2 or 12.3 to guarantee yourself a spot in Q3. So yeah, a low 1 minute 12 or a 1 minute 11 lap time will get you into Q3. So keep your eyes peeled on the lap times. I was pretty much bang on with my predictions of lap times for Q1. As Albon does a 1:13.1, which is definitely not good enough. He's probably on a scrubbed set of tyres, though. So, yeah. As here is Oliver Behrman, who also, great job to get through to Q2. And comes to the line, Behrman does a 1:13.6, which is miles away from the pace he needs to get through to Q3. As we've now got Verstappen, Norris, Stroll, Lawson, Bortoletto, Gasly, Alonso, and Hadjar on an outlap. And we're looking at Max Verstappen, I'm pretty sure, who is just coming through turn 11, I think it is. Oh no, turn 10 through 11, now into 12. And then into the two very high-speed final corners to start his lap. Can Max, in this session, lay down a marker for Q3? If he was to pop it straight into the 1 minute 11s, strongly into the 1 minute 11s, that would be very impressive. Let's see. That's Verstappen for the first sector. Is only a 10th up on Albon. So, yeah, not great. Let's see what the middle sector's like, though. Again, the middle sector is easily the most important part of the lap. As he comes through turn 7, 8, and up to 9. Brilliant place, by the way, to watch the cars through this part of the lap. I have been to this circuit twice before. Once for testing and once for a Grand Prix about 11 years ago. And Max, 4 tenths up on Albon. So yeah, this lap is not that good. I mean, it might be good enough to get him through to Q3, but it's not anywhere near quick enough to be impressive. As he comes through the final couple corners, and Max Verstappen's going to do a 1 minute 12.3. So yeah, probably just about good enough to get through to Q3, but yeah, nowhere near an impressive lap, as Bortoletto has just done a purple first sector. He's completed his middle sector. Let's see what he can do for the lap overall as Lawson goes up to second on a 1:13.1. Bortoletto now goes second on 13.0. These lap times, though, are quite slow. So I'm pretty sure almost all of the drivers are on a scrubbed set of tyres. So we're going to see much quicker lap times in the final runs of Q2. As Lando Norris, if he's on a scrubbed set of tyres, then this is an incredible lap he is on. Because he's 3.5 tenths up on Max after the first two sectors as Gasly goes second for Alpine. Lando Norris does a 1 minute 12.0. And like I said, if that's on a scrub set of tyres, then that McLaren is incredibly quick. Here comes Fernando Alonso. What can he do with this lap time? A 1:12.5. That's a good lap. And Alonso, you have to say, has been absolutely on fire this weekend. Of course, it's his home Grand Prix. Why wouldn't he be? As Leclerc now goes third, but only just ahead of Alonso, proving that the Ferrari definitely closer to the midfield than it is to the front. As Lewis Hamilton pops ahead of Leclerc into third, but only by a few hundredths of a second. As Oscar Piastri now goes quickest by half a tenth and does the first lap time of the weekend under 1 minute 12. So, yeah, McLaren, very quick so far. We'll see if they do any more or have any more pace in this session. As Antonelli, a 1:12.7, only 8th. George Russell goes 4th on a 1:12.4. So it's Piastri, Norris, Verstappen, Russell, Hamilton, Leclerc, Alonso, Gasly, and then Antonelli 9th, and Isaac Hadjar just about inside the top 10. And then Bortoletto 11th, very impressive from him, and he's less than a tenth away from making it to Q3. And then Lawson 12th, Albon 13th, Stroll 14th, and Behrman 15th. As I said, though, these lap times, I think, can be improved upon quite a bit. And, I mean, Isaac Hadjar is in 10th on a 1 minute 12.9. When, as I said, you'd need to do probably a 1 minute 12.3 at the slowest to get through. So I think there's another 5 to 6 tenths of a second of pace out there on the track. As Russell saying, dark clouds over towards turn 13 there is, but I don't think that's going to be rain. It should be fine. Might bring the track temperature down if it comes over the track a bit more, but yeah, should be fine. So yeah, the point is there is a lot more pace out there to be found by, I think, most, if not all, the teams. Like I said, another 5 to maybe at most 6 tenths of a second. But in the drop zone with 5.5 minutes to go, Bortoletto, Lawson, Albon, Stroll, and Behrman. Will it remain that way? As, yeah, over Montmello, which is the town where this track is based. Yeah, some darker clouds coming in. The track, though, still bathed in incredibly hot sunshine. No one that you notice Hadjar pretty quick? Absolutely. He has been, I think, the biggest surprise of this season by far. Because again, I think many others did not expect him to be this level of good. And yeah, he has been absolutely brilliant. Yeah, the car is good. We have to remember that it is a good car. Tsunoda showed that in the first couple races of the season, but it's about delivering in the car that you have, or sometimes over delivering. And Hadjar is delivering pretty much every weekend in qualifying. He is delivering what is there. Whether he'll get through to Q3 here, though, we'll see. He probably should, but it's not guarantee. As some cars now filtering back out onto the circuit. But let me just see. Well, hopefully we'll see in a moment the lap time difference through the field. But yeah, the McLarens and Max are all good in terms of making it through to Q3. I think George Russell as well just about has done enough. But the Ferraris, I think, are probably the highest placed cars that are at risk of elimination. I mean, the Ferraris still should make it through with the lap times they've done so far. But yeah, they're definitely not out of range. And one driver that definitely is not out of range is Kimi Antonelli, currently in 9th and needs to find a lot more lap time. His best time so far is a 1 minute 12.7, I think it is. All he needs to find is another probably 0.4 of a second on this final lap, and that should be enough to get him into Q3 for the first time since Miami. According to AWS, they project a 1:12.7 to be the knockout time. We'll see about that. I still think it'll be probably a 1:12.4 or 1:12.5. But we'll see. As here comes Lance Stroll, currently 14th. Alonso's in the top 10. Really, Stroll should be there as well. Let's see if he can do it. Through turn 1. And turn 2 and 3. And yeah, looks absolutely fine. No problems that I can see. Lance Stroll for the first sector, 0.5 down on Hadjar, but again, first sector is not that important as Antonelli is coming through the first sector now. I think with the first sector, all that matters is you don't make a mistake. Pretty much the same for the final sector as well. It's the middle sector where you really need to get the lap time out of the track. But is Stroll and Antonelli doing that? For Stroll, not really. I mean, he's improving quite a bit on his own, what he's done. It's going to be a lot better than the lap time he's done, but I'm not sure this is going to be good enough to get him into Q3 overall. We'll probably put him in the top 10 briefly, but again, I'm not sure it'll be good enough overall. As here comes Lance Stroll to the line. And no, he goes 12th. It's not good enough. Only he improved by about 3.5 which really is not good enough improvement. He should be in the top 10, should Stroll. Here comes Antonelli, who only improves by a couple tenths of a second. So he's not all clear yet. As here comes Alexander Albon, currently 14th. Be incredible if he makes it into the top 10. Can he? He goes up to 10th. But will he stay there? Not sure he will. As here comes Bortoleto. Only 11th. Still a great effort, though, from the Brazilian. But it's really Isaac Hadjar that we need to look out for. He is the driver that can get himself into the top 10. And handles the final couple corners well to the line. And Hadjar, what a lap. He goes 6th. And pushes Albon out. Here comes Hadjar's teammate Liam Lawson. Can he push Pierre Gasly out? To the line he comes. No, Lawson only 13th. That is disappointing when Hadjar made the top 10. And here now is Oliver Behrman. Can he somehow get into the top 10? He's 4/10 off Gasly at the moment. He'd do well to get ahead of Stroll in 14th place, if I'm being honest. The Haas just not that quick over a single lap at the moment. As Behrman through the final couple corners, pushing as hard as he can to the line, stays 15th. But there you go, guys. That is Q2 over and done with. Let's go through the drivers that have made it through to the top 10 shootout. Oscar Piastri, Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Isaac Hadjar, brilliant from him yet again, Charles Leclerc, Fernando Alonso, Kimi Antonelli, and Pierre Gasly, who by 0.03 of a second makes it in. Great job by the Frenchman again. And knocked out in Q2, Alex Albon, Gabriel Bortoleto, Liam Lawson, Lance Stroll, and Oliver Behrman. But yeah, disappointing from Lawson. I think he really should have been at least in 11th. Maybe even you could say, yeah, making the top 10. Depends obviously where Hadjar ends up. As Albon complaining about the Haas being purposely slow in the final sector, I don't think Haas held up Albon there, so I don't think there's anything to really investigate there. Great job, though, by Bortoleto. 12th on the grid. That is... You can't ask any more of him. Albon as well, I thought that was a good effort from Albon. Because, again, the car is not top 10 material this weekend, so I think Albon's done the best he could in a bit of a struggling Williams car this weekend. Yeah, great job by Gasly and Hadjar to get them into the top 10. Hadjar in Q3 for the... how many times is that now? It's got to be like the 6th time this season. Been absolutely incredible in qualifying this year. And quickly becoming one of my favourites, I have to say. Supercurve says, do you guys think, if I can speak, the race will be a good one or the usual boring Barcelona? It depends on who's leading at the first corner. If it's Max or a Mercedes like it was last year, I think we'll get a race as good as last year. And last year's race was actually pretty good. So, yeah. I think it depends all on the first corner. If McLaren are leading through the first couple of corners, I think McLaren will comfortably win the race, especially if they've got a 1-2. Looney Classics asking me, do you agree that Oscar is better 3 years into his F1 career than Max was 3 years into his F1 career? I'm going to say no, purely because I think Max was a bit quicker when he was in year 3 compared to Oscar. Oscar definitely makes less mistakes and he's more, especially in a race situation, probably more consistent than Max was in year 3. Remember, Max in year 3, this was 2017. Yeah, from that aspect, you could say Oscar's better, but in terms of pure pace, I think Max was... if you put that Max up against this version of Piastri, I think Max would be quicker. And I think, yeah, did Max make some mistakes? Yeah, but I think it's a bit overstated how many he made. It wasn't every single weekend. It was, once every maybe 5 races or so on average. So, yeah. But, Piastri, considering this is his 3rd year in his career, he's doing incredibly well. Has Q3 started yet? No, it has not. Q3 is underway in about 2 or 3 minutes. Make sure that as well, If you haven't already, to smash a like button. We're on 62 likes. Let's try and get up to, I don't know, 80 plus likes if we can in the next, say, 20 minutes. As, yeah, well, I'm just watching some SkyPad analysis from Anthony Davidson about some of the drivers that I think got through or failed to miss out, or, sorry, failed to make it to Q3. But yeah, at the minute, if you base what's going to happen in Q3 off of what we've seen so far, then yeah, probably McLaren will get pole position here. But I still have a feeling that Max has more pace in that Red Bull. So yeah, we'll see. The pole position time should be a low 1 minute 11, anywhere between a 1:11.0 and a 1:11.3. Remember, what do you call it? Pole position last year was a 1:11.383, I think it was, which was Lando Norris. So, yeah. So, yeah, if you're Max Verstappen or you're George Russell, if you can nail a low 1 minute 11 in your first Q3 lap, you have set yourself up brilliantly for a possible pole position. But no doubt, McLaren have got the best car, but just because McLaren have got the best car doesn't mean they're going to get pole, because McLaren don't have the best drivers. They have two very quick drivers, but they are not the quickest. I think Verstappen and Russell, in my view, are quicker. Not by much. I'm not saying it's, half a second or anything ridiculous like that, but if you put Verstappen and Russell in those cars, I think the McLaren would be a bit quicker. As there is a heavy rain shower north of the circuit, and yeah, it is, or not north of the circuit, I think it's coming in from the coast, which is not that far away from the circuit. But it's dry at the moment, and it will remain dry until we see otherwise. Q3 though has begun. Who will get pole? We're about to find out. But let me just quickly, as we've just had just over 1,000 votes, let me just finish up the results of this poll. So 1,000 votes. Thank you very much for voting, guys, if you have. I asked you guys who will take pole position for the Spanish Grand Prix, and 38% of the vote went to Max Verstappen, 35% for Oscar Piastri, so a very tight vote, 20% for Norris, and 5% for George Russell. I agree. I think Verstappen will take pole, but it is going to be very close. But I wouldn't be surprised if McLaren took pole, because again, they've got a very good car. No doubt about that. As the sunshine has now gone away, it's now, sun and cloud a bit over the track, as we've got 10 minutes and 40 seconds to go in qualifying. And if the rain does hit, this first run in Q3, this might be it. And out comes Max Verstappen. Only one pole position he's had here in Spain before. He's always been super quick here, but he's not always had the quickest car at this circuit. He's only really had the quickest car at this circuit in the year he got pole a couple years ago. But he's been very close on many occasions. Lewis Hamilton just about pipped him in 2021. Same with Leclerc in 2022. And same with Lando Norris last year. So if you end up ahead of Verstappen on the grid here, you're either going to be on pole or incredibly close to it. As Ferrari are waiting to release their car, they better hope the rain doesn't come. But here comes your championship leader, Oscar Piastri, who, by the way, has never qualified in the top 5 on the grid at the Spanish Grand Prix. Can he get what would be a crucial pole position for his World Championship challenge? Here comes Piastri to the first sector. 21.4, that is a very good first sector. Now into the middle part of the lap. And the McLaren looking good. Like I said, a low 1 minute 11 is what I think pole position will be. As Piastri through turn 9. 50.0 after the first 2 sectors. He's got a car ahead of him. Not too far ahead of him. And it's the other... is it the other McLaren? Not quite sure. Yeah, it is. As Oscar Piastri comes to the line, it is a 1 minute 11.8. Which is not terrible, but I think beatable. As Antonelli goes second. But over a second slower than Piastri. Here comes George Russell. Purple final sector, but a quarter of a second slower than Piastri. Here comes Max Verstappen. Half a second off the pace of Piastri. That is, yeah, dramatic. That lap time from Max is barely quicker than what he did in Q2. Here comes Lando Norris. As I said, that lap time from Piastri I do think is beatable. Can he, though, beat it? As he's 1,000th of a second up on Piastri after the first 2 sectors. As Lewis Hamilton goes 4th, only just behind Max Verstappen by a 10th. Here comes Norris, though. Took pole last year. Can he put himself on provisional pole this year? Yes, he does by 0.017 of a second. Lando Norris is on provisional pole position. But again, and I said this earlier with the lap times we had in practice too. The lap times just have not been that quick this weekend. As Leclerc is only a 10th off Norris after the first 2 sectors. Yeah, the lap times this weekend just haven't been as quick as I expected, given that last year's pole was a 1:11.3. As Leclerc through the final corner, where can he put this Ferrari? 4th, just ahead of Max Verstappen. What a lap by Leclerc. And only half a tenth behind Russell. That is spectacular from Ferrari. If they were to secure 4th and 6th, I think they'd be pretty happy with that, given the issues they've had with this car. But I think there's still quite a few drivers out there who've got a lot more pace in the bag. Verstappen, definitely. Antonelli, obviously. But I still think there's more pace out there on the track. As Oscar pointing out how cheeky Lando is for starting his lap with a bit of a slipstream from Oscar. And, well, that probably is the reason why Norris is currently ahead of him by the amount he is. But there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Norris just taking advantage of the situation, which all great drivers would do. Here comes Fernando Alonso. What is he capable of in this Aston Martin? Been pretty close with the Ferraris all weekend. Ferrari currently 4th on the grid. Can he keep it up and put himself right in the mix? Quarter of a second down on McLaren after the first sector. But the middle sector has appeared to be the best part of the lap for this Aston Martin car. And through turns 7 and 8. Alonso flat now through turn 9. And Alonso 4.5 tenths down after the first 2 sectors. Alonso, if he has a really good final sector, might be able to put this ahead of Hamilton in 6th. But he's going to go at worst 7th with this lap. As through the final couple corners he comes. The 40-plus-year-old Spaniard to the line. And he goes 5th. Ahead of Verstappen and Hamilton. And, well, that probably will be his final lap of qualifying. But what an effort from Alonso. Still, even though he is a fossil compared to some of the drivers on the grid, he is still showing why he is one of the best in the world at what he does. And as Rook says in the chat, I think the rain is just a bit too far north of the circuit for it to hit. As Ferrari have finished up Leclerc. Leclerc's not going back out again. I wonder why that is. Leclerc surely has an issue. Why would you not send your main top driver out there? Lewis Hamilton's going back out. So, yeah, there must be an issue, surely, with that Ferrari car. That might be very costly. Because if Verstappen and Hamilton and Antonelli all improve, and Hamilton, Leclerc could end up 8th on the grid here. As Alonso waving to the crowd, he is coming back in to the pits. And, yeah, brilliant job by Alonso. We'll see where he ends up. I think Alonso will end up at least in the top 8. As McLaren just on their outlaps. And yeah, Max Verstappen 6th. He can definitely improve. Verstappen, the lap time Verstappen has done so far is not that much quicker than what he did in Q2. So there is a lot more pace in that Red Bull. I have no doubt about it. Whether it's pole position pace, we will have to find out in these final couple minutes. And we'll see if there's any more pace in the Mercedes of George Russell. But here is Verstappen, who's on his outlap. As there is Robert Lewandowski in the Red Bull garage. Trying to see if Max will get pole. Lando, though, currently on provisional pole. Can he secure 2 poles in a row in 2025? Something he's not had yet this season. And really needs to capitalise on the momentum that surely he'll have confidence-wise coming from winning the Monaco Grand Prix. And a brilliant first sector to start. A 10th up on Piastri, even though he ran slightly wide to the exit of turn 4. Let's see Piastri's first sector. It's good. It's not quite as good as Lando's, but it's still very good. As Hajar goes 5th for Racing Bulls. What a lap. As Lando Norris has not done a personal best middle sector, but he's still a 10th up on the time he's done previously. As Piastri flying through turn 9 now as Gasly goes 5th for Alpine. What a lap by him. Piastri's done a brilliant middle sector compared to Norris. Has Norris thrown it away? Let's see. Lando comes to the line, improves by 0.06 of a second, but I'm not sure if that will be enough. As Oscar Piastri, can he take his first ever pole in Spain? He puts it there by 0.2 of a second, a 1:11.5. Is that enough? Antonelli goes 4th. as we wait for Lewis Hamilton. Currently in 10th. He's not doing any purple sectors. As Hamilton to the line goes 3rd. That's a brilliant lap by Hamilton. Max Verstappen, he comes to the line and he goes 3rd, but he's 3/10 off Piastri, even though he did a purple final sector. What can George Russell do? Can he somehow get pole for Mercedes? No, he can't. He's 4th on the grid. And McLaren, for the first time in a while, have locked out the front row of the grid. And Oscar Piastri takes his first ever pole in Spain. And that, if he wins the championship, that's one of the pole position laps he will look back on as having got the job done in 2025. Lando did not produce his best final effort, but Oscar Piastri did. And that's why Piastri is on pole for tomorrow's Spanish Grand Prix by 0.2 of a second. Super effort from the Australian, who just showed, again, exactly why he is leading the championship. Verstappen 3rd. If Verstappen had had a personal best first sector, I'm curious to see whether he could have been on the front row there. But it is not all dead and buried for Max in regards to tomorrow. Because remember, we've still got the start of the race, and easily Max could get into the lead. We saw Russell get into the lead last year from 4th on the grid. Talking of 4th on the grid, George Russell is there yet again, just ahead of ex-teammate Lewis Hamilton. Antonelli 6th. Leclerc, again, must have had an issue to prevent him going out for the final run, and ends up 7th on the grid. 8th, Pierre Gasly. 9th, Hadjar. 10th, Alonso. Alonso will be disappointed not to be a bit higher than that. But great effort from Gasly and Hadjar. And then Albon 11th, Bortoletto 12th, Lawson 13th, Stroll 14th, Behrman 15th, Hulkenberg 16th, Ocon 17th, Sainz 18th, Colapinto 19th, and Yuki Tsunoda will round out the field for tomorrow's Spanish Grand Prix. Reminder, guys, I will be live tomorrow, 2 hours before lights out at 12 p.m. UK time, to build up to and watch along the race for the 2025 Spanish Grand Prix. I will also be joined by my co-commentator, as always, Niblo, to bring you the events of the Spanish Grand Prix. So make sure to join us tomorrow for what should be a decent race. But one thing I will do quickly is set up a poll in the chat. To ask who is your driver of the day for qualifying? For qualifying in Spain. And your options for driver of the day will be Oscar Piastri. I'm going to put Lewis Hamilton in there. Thought he had a good qualifying. So yeah, Hamilton. And then I'll put Pierre Gasly and Isaac Hadjar. For me, driver of the day is clearly Oscar Piastri, but you can let me know in that poll who you think the driver of the day for qualifying is. A big shame, though, with Leclerc, that he wasn't able to go out again, because if he was, given that he's been a 10th or so quicker than Hamilton this weekend, Leclerc probably could have put himself on the second row of the grid or even 3rd. So Ferrari were a lot quicker in the end than I was expecting, so egg on my face. But they definitely could have got a bit of a better result there with Leclerc. But Ferrari, their race pace has been decent as of late, so we'll see. We'll see what they can do. I've just seen, so Leclerc didn't go out again because he had only one set of soft tires left, and they were a used set. So he said, "quote With the scrub set, I won't go any faster. I know we're a bit of a disadvantage, but that's the way it is." So, yeah. Strategically, they just need to probably sort that out next time so that he actually has a fresh set of soft tires. And I'm seeing as well that on X that he used 2 sets of soft tires in practice 3, and he has kept back a new set of medium, so he's got 2 new sets of medium tires for tomorrow. So, yeah. Maybe it will play back in his favour for the race tomorrow. Looney Classic says, good lap from Lewis, just had a slower car. Yeah. Probably one of the best laps he's done this year, to be honest. And looking at the times, he ended up about 0.2 of a second away from Verstappen in third. So, yeah. From Lewis Hamilton's point of view, good enough. Puts him right in that fight for a possible podium tomorrow, because again, Ferrari's race pace has looked good in these last couple races, and so far this weekend on the long runs, they've looked good. So, yeah, Hamilton might have an outside chance of a podium tomorrow. Obviously, took the podium last year and the year before for the Mercedes team. But I mean, the chances of tomorrow's race being as exciting as last year, I'd say, are definitely lesser, because, quite simply, if McLaren lead the pack away first and second, McLaren are going to win the race tomorrow. Maybe not first and second, but they will win the race tomorrow. And then the fight for the podium will be very interesting between Verstappen, Russell, Hamilton, Antonelli, and Leclerc. And see you tomorrow to Super Kev. Hopefully, we'll have you back tomorrow. Rook says, if Lewis has a bad start to the season, he usually perks up just for some break. Yeah, last year in June and July was probably his best part of the season, to be honest. But yeah, Ferrari. I mean, I think Ferrari will be a bit relieved that qualifying was not as bad as it could have been. But I think, if only they had saved an extra set of soft tyres, Leclerc could have took at least 4th, maybe even 3rd. So there was more on offer possibly in this Grand Prix. But again, if they've saved an extra set of mediums, then maybe they can claw it back, that position. Mick Dunn says Hamilton is washed. I think mostly he is. I think washed, maybe a bit too aggressive to say, but he's definitely past his prime. But let's give credit where credit's due. Today was a good lap from him, and he has, in general, in qualifying, he has looked closer to Leclerc in these last couple race weekends, or not just in qualifying. I'd say with single lap pace, he's not looked, as far off as he was in the first, what was it, like 5-6 races or so. where he was, nowhere near good enough as far as I was concerned. But yeah, let's see what Hamilton can do from 5th tomorrow. Right, let me find a couple more comments, and then we'll come to the end of the stream because it's pretty hot in my room, and yeah, I need some fresh air. Dane says, honestly, hope Yuki starts delivering. It would be nice to see him up there with Lewis, and hopefully Yuki can take out Lewis in the races. I'd be rooting for Yuki to do that. That's absolutely stupid to root for a driver to take out others. But you do you. Will says, Bortoletto, driver of the day for me. I was considering putting him in there, but I thought Hadjar and Gasly deserved shouts as well for the effort they did. But the midfield battle should be interesting between Gasly, Hadjar, Alonso, and then obviously Sainz and Tsunoda, you'd imagine, coming through the field. Albon maybe making the top 10. So yeah, we'll keep our eyes on that. Rooks saying, have you still got that TV that gives off more heat than a Woodstone Chazza? I honestly, I can't remember. I did have a different TV a few years ago. So, yeah, I can't remember. I mean, it gets hot, but not, it doesn't get, like, overly dramatically hot, like I've had other TVs do. So, yeah, it's just normal. I do need to get a new TV, though, because it's not quite working as it should. So I'll probably get a new one pretty soon. And as just been pointed out to me, Max Verstappen and George Russell set the exact same lap time. So, yeah, Leclerc absolutely could have got third on the grid there. So, yeah, we will see what happens tomorrow. I think, again, if they all get away, say the top 10 gets away in grid order, then it should be McLaren 1, 2, and then third, a battle, between Verstappen, Russell, Hamilton, Antonelli, Leclerc. But Verstappen, I think, has to be the favourite to win that battle. But even though Ferrari have got good race pace by the looks of it, they're not in a good enough position, I think, to fully capitalise on that. So, yeah. But ultimately, we'll see. We'll see what happens tomorrow. Right. Let me just finish up this poll in the chat because we've got a clear winner. And I asked you guys, who is your driver of the day for qualifying in Spain? And with 57% of the vote after 59 votes, Oscar Piastri wins it. Hamilton, 27%, Hadjar, 10%, and Gasly on 5%. But yeah, guys, thank you very much for coming on to this qualifying watch along. And yeah, tomorrow, make sure to join me 2 hours before lights out for the Grand Prix, of course, at 12 p.m. UK time for the race watch along. And of course, we'll do the build up and then the watch along itself. And yeah, should be an interesting Grand Prix. A very important one as well, remember, because all three of the championship contenders, Piastri, Norris, and Verstappen, all three of them really have to win this race. So it's going to be very interesting, especially that start. Especially if Max Verstappen has a clear eye on maybe the outside line going into turn 1 and 2. Yeah, we will see how that plays out. Crucial race this is in the World Championship fight. But yeah, make sure to join me at 12 p.m. UK time tomorrow for the race watch along. Cheers for today. Before I go, again, make sure to subscribe for more content like this because we will be doing quali and race watch-alongs for every Grand Prix until the end of July. That is a guarantee. So make sure to subscribe if you want to keep absolutely up to date with everything going on in Formula 1. And as well, smash the like button before you go if you haven't already. It does help show me that you guys actually enjoy these streams and these watch-alongs. So make sure to do that if you have not already. And yeah, make sure to join me tomorrow for what should be a good Spanish Grand Prix at the Circuit De Catalunya. And after this brilliant qualifying, let's hope, like I said, for a good Grand Prix tomorrow. And until tomorrow at 12 p.m, guys, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.